Oh yeah, I do have a ghost story.
I'm already recording.
Oh wait, okay.
Did you spoil the podcast to our loyal fans,
I'm sorry.
listeners? Oh, you have a ghost story.
I do have a ghost story.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Well, you know what?
We'll get into it soon.
Oh, okay. Do you want me to gently enter the podcast?
Yeah. Ease us in.
Ease us in. All right. Hey, you and welcome. Well, you already know what's going to happen. Keith has a ghost story ready. He's got locked and loaded. He's chomping at the bit.
I'm so excited.
Look at him. I can see him here. He's licking his chops, ready to get into today's ghost story he has for you. I've not heard it. Every time Keith tries to broach the story of, something weird happened in the house, I'm saving for the pod. That's my...
Save it. Yeah. I
always save it for the pod.
Every single time it happens, I go to text him, oh no, leave it, don't text him.
Exactly.
So this happened in the house, but I wasn't in the house. So we were driving home, me, my wife, my daughter.
Yeah.
And so we live in a cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
And so we're driving down, and I usually drive to the end of the cul-de-sac and then turn around. So, the next morning.
Your car is facing the exit.
Exactly, yeah. So we were driving by, and my daughter, she was looking at our house. She's like, there's our house. And I was like, yeah. And she's like, there's someone in our house. I was like, what? And then we pulled around, we came back, she looked up, like, there he is. I was like, where? I didn't see it. She's like, he's all dark. I was like, and then she's like, oh, he's gone. I was like, what? It was so weird. And then because we'd been away for a couple of days. And then we came into the house, and I was like, oh my God, is it like an intruder in the house?
Yeah.
But no, everyone's locked up, everyone's fine. But yeah, she's seen something in the house.
That is incredibly terrifying.
Isn't it? It was so weird. She's like, there he is. He's all dark. I was like, oh my God, that's fucking horrifying.
Yeah.
I was like, no, there's no one in the house. I was like, I'm shitting myself.
Oh, do you know, is he like upstairs or?
Yeah, in my office
in
window.
Your office?
In my office window, yeah. Because I usually have the blind up. So yeah.
Yeah.
Weird, man.
That is.
Oh, actually, that's where I keep the Ouija board.
Ooh, and it's just below the attic.
It is just below the attic, yeah.
Damn. Okay, I'm not gonna your. I'm just kidding. That is creepy though.
I thought you liked that one.
Yeah, that is a creepy one.
Yeah, it was weird. Yeah.
We should start documenting these. You know what we should do?
We are on the podcast.
Okay, that's true.
We have it all recorded.
Yeah, keep forgetting this is recorded. I keep forgetting people listen to this. Yes, okay, they are documented. But you know what I mean? Have a like
a journal.
A journal. And what we should do is we should recreate.
What do you mean?
Like make a movie out of this.
Oh,
okay. Maybe it will make the ghost will appear. You want to? Hey, you guys, can I be in a movie too?
That'd be good. Yeah.
Cool. We could recreate them. Maybe it will entice the spirits to.
Yeah, we need more activity.
Exactly, lads. Come on, giddy up. Like
it's been quiet for a while. I was like, oh, maybe he's buggered off.
Not much waiting for you.
Yeah, nothing's really happened since like before Christmas.
Well, what's interesting is that when it happened, I think that was a couple of weeks ago when we had a bad storm. Is that around the time?
It was just after the storm.
We had a very bad storm here in Ireland. Storm Eowyn. And it was it wrecked shit. I had no power for about like 12 hours, which is not bad, but
Yeah, my bin fell over.
Whoa.
I know, right?
And they say nurses have it tough. Wow.
Oh, the devastation.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but maybe he was getting ready for the storm, or
yeah, it awoken something.
Very creepy. All right. Well,
before it was always just like things moving and stuff. So that's the first time that somebody in the family has seen something, and it was my daughter.
Yeah. All right. Weird. Okay. Very good. Okay. Now my turn.
Okay.
All right. So, movies. Mike's horror movie reviews. A horror movie I've seen recently was one called Speak No Evil.
Did we see this?
No.
Oh, okay. What am I thinking of?
I don't know.
What was the one with the? Do you know with the hand? And what was that called again?
Oh yeah, was that not called Speak No Evil too?
That was something along those lines. Speak to Me.
Speak to Me. Speak to Me. That was well, I guess as we're talking about Speak to Me, because I don't think we talked about that in the podcast because you and I watched that together. That was a really good concept.
Yeah.
But it felt like the movie only started like when it was ending. That's what annoyed me about it. Was like we were watching the movie, folks, and it's a worthwhile movie. It's an Australian movie, I think. A lot of people gave it glowing reviews. So me and Keith sat down to watch it, and basically the premise is it's like a hand of glory, and if you touch it, you see ghosts and shit like that. But if you touch it for too long, you like
they start coming out.
The ghosts start possessing you. It has some genuinely scary moments in it, but it's like the good shit like doesn't start for like an hour into the movie, and the movie's only like 90 minutes long. So I was watching the clock and I was like, when's the actual shit gonna fucking start? But then when the shit started happening, it actually got really good. But it was just took way too long to get there.
Yeah, it did.
So that's a brief review of that. No, this movie is Speak No Evil. So this movie is, I can hear people who are listening, oh, it was a remake commercial. It's the remake I watched with James McAvoy.
Oh,
I watched James McAvoy is
yeah.
like one of those actors who, if he's in it, he's going to be good.
Yeah, he's good.
I love
Yeah,
James McAvoy.
yeah.
So he's great in it. So basically, the basic premise of the movie is it's an American couple who live in the UK, but they go on holidays to like Italy or somewhere. And while they're in Italy, they meet this other couple, James McAvoy, his wife, and their families. They just get on really well. James McAvoy is like this really nice, charming. They're having a great time together, blah, blah, blah. So then the main couple, they go back to their house in London. James McAvoy's from somewhere else in the south of England or something. And he's like, when we go back to England, we should meet up. You should come visit me on my farm. They are like, all right, yeah, they do go visit him on his farm. And slowly, he just kind of gets more and more insidious as the time goes on. He starts becoming like really passive aggressive, manipulative. It's a very good performance because it's like, man, I know people who do shit like you do in the movie, like, just very undermining stuff the whole time. But then it gets darker and darker until there's, murder. He's brilliant in it.
Yeah.
But he's brilliant in everything. So yeah, no, good movie. I enjoyed it all the way through. I hadn't seen the original, but I thought this movie was good. Ending, kind of meh, but it's very hard to have a good ending to a horror movie.
Yeah, that's true.
It really is. Except, I have to say, so I haven't seen the original Speak No Evil, the Dutch or Danish, I can't remember which version, but I read the Wikipedia just as a brief, because I'd heard, that's really good. The original is really good. So just a quick Wikipedia, what was the differences between the plot? 99% the same, except for the ending. In the original version, which I thought the original ending was 10 times better than the remake's ending, but I think it's in the remake, because it was for like an English-speaking audience, they just had the Hollywood-ized the ending a little bit.
It needs to be all tied up in a neat little package type thing?
And it's kind of like, the good guys have to win. Whereas in the other version, it was like, oh no, the bad guys win, which I think is much better.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I thought the ending, if it had the ending of the like European version, that would have been 10 times better. I probably would have loved the movie then.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it has a bit too, good guys win kind of stuff.
Yeah, I like when the bad guys win. It's always good.
It's just more interesting and different, and it's like, I wasn't expecting that. I thought it was good though. I liked it. I liked the movie, as I said. Then when I found out the ending it should have had, I was like, it
would have been better.
Yeah, exactly. Would have been a lot better. But yeah, decent movie. Some really good performances in it.
Cool.
Everybody in it kind of sucks, which is I kind of like the movie. Everybody's unlikable in it.
Yeah, that's
and it's
good.
like the kind of movie when they make decisions and you're like, no, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
But it's fun. So I'd give that probably like a 2.5 out of 5.
Nice. Okay, cool.
The next movie I watched was a giant piece of shit. It's called Hagazusa.
It sounds terrible.
It's sort of a witchy movie. I think it's set in like Austria or Switzerland. It's kind of like set in like medieval times, maybe the 1700s or something. Okay. I was honestly kind of expecting it to be something like The Witch.
Yeah.
Right. So it starts off really, really good. It's like this mom and her daughter. Yeah, it's like set in like 17 to 1800s. Like some around. It never says what time period it's set in, but like olden days.
Yeah.
They live in like the Alps or something.
They don't
like
have
that.
phones.
They don't have phones. And it's a beautiful movie. Yeah. Like the entire movie is like gorgeous shots of mountains and forests and creepy woods,
Real scenic.
You can kind of imagine like Hansel and Gretel, like Grimm's fairy tales, like set in that world. Yeah, there's a mom and a daughter and they're walking through the woods and the guy is saying, like the monster is out tonight or whatever, be careful. It seems like at one point then at the start of the movie, they're in their little cabin. Again, it's just the mom and the daughter. It's like the mom gets possessed by a witch.
Okay.
It's really, really well done. It's really creepy.
Yeah.
But then the movie just turns into a giant piece of shit.
Okay.
And you're kind of just waiting for the plot to happen.
Yeah.
Nothing happens in the movie. Honestly, people are probably wondering, oh, Mike, you've not really explained the plot or what actually is the story of the movie. It's because there is no plot in this movie. It's a very pretty movie and things just happen, but none of it really means anything.
Right, okay.
At the end of it, I think she bursts into flames.
Right.
And I think she also eats her dead baby, kills her baby and then eats it at one point.
Okay,
it's like horrifying to watch, but it's like, what's the point of what I'm watching? Like, where's the story here?
Yeah.
So anyway,
why did she eat the baby? I need to know.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was watching the movie and I was like, wow, that sucks. It's like just a plotless movie of this woman who's like a witch, but she's not a witch, but people think she's a witch.
Okay.
And it's like, there's like 3 actors in the entire movie.
Okay.
They're all speaking a language I don't understand. German.
Oh, is it dubbed, is it?
No, it was subtitles. I don't like watching dubbed movies.
Okay.
It just pisses me off when I see the things. Anyway, so I had to watch that.
That would have worked a lot better on a visual platform there.
Folks, just so you know, I moved my mouth a lot and then spoke.
What you heard was Michael speaking.
So I had to wash the taste of that shit out of my mouth with an excellent movie.
Okay, great.
Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls.
Was it, yeah?
Yeah, they did. Of course they did.
That's a great movie,
Ace Ventura rocks.
Oh, man.
I love it. Ace Ventura 2, possibly as good, if not better than the first one.
Man, how much did we watch that in your house when we were young?
Oh, man. For the folks who don't know, me and Keith were Oh, right. We were obsessed with Ace Ventura.
Yeah.
Has any actor in history ever had as many like hit after hit after hit as Jim Carrey in the 90s? I don't think so.
And like so quotable as well.
And they've all aged pretty well. Like Dumb and Dumber still holds up really, really well. It's
great
very,
movie.
very funny.
Yeah, that's a great movie.
I love the ending of the movie as well. It's like, he comes out and his bride to be, the two tribes are marrying. She's not a virgin. He looks at Ace Ventura and he's just running away. Freeze frame him just being chased by all these tribesmen. It's such a good movie. It's hilarious.
That's a good movie.
Yeah. So, folks, it's usually Mike's horror movie hour, but you know what? Do yourself a favor. Go watch Ace Ventura. Go rewatch, I should say, because I'm assuming you've all watched it. Go rewatch Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls.
You won't be disappointed.
You won't be disappointed.
You know you won't.
And you know what? He may even shed a tear at the start. Still gets me when he's doing the cliffhanger thing with the raccoon.
Oh, yeah.
And he lets the raccoon's paw.
God, I forgot about that one.
It's still tough to watch.
Yeah, that's a hard one. Yeah.
But you know what? You'll laugh, you'll cry. It's got a little bit of everything. It's got everything. Yeah. Has a man, the bad guy, getting sodomized by a gorilla. I mean, what more do you need?
Still him coming out of the rhino's ass is one of the funniest
moments. Yeah. It's excellent. All right. So now that we've talked about Mike's horror movie hour, let's get into today's episode of the That Chapter podcast, which is the story of Allan Legere, the monster of the Miramichi, part 2. Yeah, he's a real sick puppy.
Yeah, he's a dirtbag.
We do. He is, and we do. So I was trying to something you did not say. So in part 1, we looked at Allan's upbringing, his first murder committed, that of John Glendenning, and the horrible assault on his wife Mary, all that led to Allan being in prison in the first place. In prison, then, he was a model prisoner. Yes, sir, no, sir, please can I have some more, all that good stuff. Until he had a mysterious ear infection that got him sent to the hospital, where he whipped a radio antenna out of his butt cheeks and made his escape, beginning a 7-month-long reign of terror in the town he grew up in, a town where he hated everybody.
Yeah.
He began his reign of terror in the Miramichi area of New Brunswick, Canada, and so far, over like a 6-7 month period, he began beating, raping, murdering, at the point where we are now, about 6-7 months in. Everybody was terrified. He was the boogeyman of the Miramichi. People would see him in the distance, see him peeking in windows, see somebody outside, then it was revealed he was inside the house the entire time. It's literally urban legends, horror movie type stuff.
And he does a dart off into the woods and he'd be gone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's crazy. He was breaking homes, as I said, robbing, attacking, beating, shooting, and he had murdered, at this point, 3 people. And the monster of the Miramichi ain't done yet. Let's pick up where we left off. He just murdered Donna and Linda Dohney in their home in October of 1989, and he's still going strong. So the biggest impact that month, October of 1989, was yet to come, and it was on a group not targeted by Legere, not yet. The children of the Miramichi. It was suggested that the idea of large groups gathering and roaming around town wearing masks and costumes would have made it far too easy for an animal like Legere to roam free and stalk potential victims. And so, in the town, the decision was made to cancel Halloween that year. Instead of trick-or-treating, smaller children's parties were organized. Even though, through all of this, Legere never actually directed his rage at children. In fact, he had children of his own, though he never seen them. But now the town and community were becoming paralyzed by the fear of not only what Legere had done, but what he may actually do.
It's a good call. Like in the movie Halloween, they never cancelled it after Mike Myers got out of the mental institution. And we all know how that worked out.
It's a good thing they cancel it. You never know what animal like Legere could have done. So with the heat on him at an all-time high, Legere lay low for a couple of weeks. That was until around midnight on October 28th, 1989, a Newcastle man spotted a tall fella lurking outside his Tweedy Street home. When he went outside to check it, he found that someone had smashed the windows of his truck, which had been parked in his driveway. Now, no one knew if that was Legere, who had done this, who was responsible, but each and every little thing that happened in the area was now being chalked up to him. Can't find my shoes. Legere!
Damn it, Legere!
At it again! That same night, someone broke into a truck parked outside a hotel and stole 2 guns from a locked storage box in the truck's bed. The idea of Legere now being heavily armed was the last thing authorities needed for the public to hear. I love this idea. Man, there's a madman on the loose. He's murdered 4 people. He's been on the loose for about 6-7 months. I'm gonna leave my guns just in my truck outside, as you do. I mean, they're in a locked, they were in like a locked storage box, but I mean, it's still in a truck. You can just steal the entire storage box.
Right. That would be like...
Seems a very foolish thing to do.
It does. Those guns would be in my bed with me.
Yeah, exactly.
And on my person at all times.
Exactly, yeah. So when the call came in from the man about, the damage to his car, the smashed windows, a K9 unit was dispatched to the scene to see if they could pick up the trail. Every slight chance the police got to potentially catch up with Legere, they were going to jump on it. And so an officer and his good boy, they actually made contact with Legere, and the resulting pursuit even had them and Legere exchanging gunfire, if you can believe that. At one point, the officer took a nearly 30-foot tumble to the ground. He got lucky and walked away with only minor injuries. But by the time more Mounties arrived to help in the shootout and now hunt, once again, Legere managed to evade capture by the skin of his teeth. Just a few hours after the chase and near arrest, word of the night's theatrics had already reached residents. One of them to take an interest in the nearby chaos was a Newcastle man named William Skid. Skid had actually just been talking to a friend on the phone when he himself noticed a man standing in his garden. Puzzled by why someone was in his garden, but not quite yet putting 2 and 2 together, Skid knocked on the window. Try and get the man's attention. What are you doing? What are you doing in my garden? Right as his knuckles skimmed off the glass, the man turned, and Skid saw he had 2 rifles, one in each hand.
Jesus. No, you're good.
Yeah, it's fine. Stay in my garden. Skid thought that maybe it was a Mountie involved in the search, but when the man darted off into the surrounding woods, Skid realized what he had seen. Despite RCMP responding and the search progressing from the early morning hours to sunup, their officers were simply spread too thin and over far too many acres.
Like at this point, I don't know how he thought he was a Mountie. At this point, like Legere had been living wild in the woods for like months now.
Yeah, like 6 months.
Yeah, turn around with like 2 massive guns. Like that's probably a Mountie.
They
really let himself go.
Yeah, exactly. Throughout the next few hours, more reports of a lurker or even the odd break-in came. Some people even reported hearing gunshots in the woods. One man reported seeing a tall person hanging around a golf course. People basically at this point were afraid of their own shadows. And when it's an armed maniac who has proven themselves capable and willing to murder anyone who crosses their path, well, basically, you can see why they'd be shitting themselves. And why searching every nook and cranny of rural Canadian woodland would have to be done. But there was no way the RCMP was going to risk losing one of their own at this point. Things were bad enough. They didn't want, people to hear that Legere was a cop killer too. So the chase sort of slowed down and Legere escaped yet again. The men in charge did their best to liaise with the public, and in response to the near miss and subsequent panic, they announced they were setting up a specialized Legere task force. Only took them 6 months to set up a specialized task force to chase down the becoming a serial killer in the small area at this point.
Yeah. Well, they spent so long just trying to figure out who it was instead of actually looking for him.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we have his glasses, but is it him?
Okay, it's definitely him. Now what? I guess we gotta go get him.
Exactly, yeah. Now we know what we already knew. Great. Naturally, the local newspapers reflected the tense public situation. For the locals of the Miramichi, progress was too slow and people were growing impatient with authorities.
Yeah, it was like the lack of shared information with the public that really pissed people off. So an editor, he wrote, "The force has asked for help from the public in solving the recent series of crimes in the area. But they seem to think they will get the help that they need without providing anything meaningful in the way of information to the public. We're frightened and we want this to end." I'd say it was terrifying living in the area at the time that there were only rumours to go on, and the RCMP, they were running through the woods, getting caught up in gunfights. At this stage, the RCMP, they had 2 choices. One was to increase their presence on the streets to, ease public fears, or set up stakeout teams in wooded areas where they believed that the killer was hiding. In the end, they chose the first option, hoping for, a stronger police presence in the town would reassure the public. Mm-hmm. In hindsight, though, this was an unfortunate choice, because had they searched the woodland areas instead, they likely would have found one of many makeshift shelters that Legere had set up. He was moving from camp to camp each night to avoid detection. And definitely a well-placed stakeout at one of these camps or one of the areas that they thought he was, it definitely would have ended things a lot sooner. But, of course, hindsight is it's a beautiful thing.
It is, yeah. Wow, that's crazy though. He was so well like set up. He was moving campsite to campsite every single night.
Yeah, he was smart. Like even like before when he first got out of jail, remember he was like stealing cars, but he wouldn't just steal one. He'd steal multiple. He'd have like multiple areas that he was
switching.
He was always moving, always on the move. Yeah.
Like a shark.
Yeah.
So by the middle of November 1989, the DNA lab in Toronto was open for beeswax, and one of the first tasks was the Legere case. On the 13th of November, the news of the DNA testing went public. Legere had been officially linked to the Flam murder. Despite this actually being rather huge news, it didn't exactly help calm the people of Newcastle. As we said, they already knew he had murdered one of the Flam sisters and then almost killed the second one.
Yeah.
Like, you're telling us what we already knew.
Yeah, just catch him.
Yeah, we didn't need DNA, you know? They thought that true and true, of course it's him. Except, not quite. Just 2 days after the news broke that Legere was now scientifically linked by this newfangled DNA business on the Flam attack, huge news of an arrest followed. Police had the man responsible for the attacks on Morrissey Doran and the violent home invasion of the Russells we spoke about in part 1. Only the person behind those attacks wasn't Legere. The man they had arrested was a Newcastle native named Allan Vienneau. Sadly, the discovery that Legere wasn't the only violent man committing heinous crimes wasn't exactly the most reassuring news, but I guess this Allan Vienneau was thinking, hey, if there's a horrible serial killer out there, may as well do what I want and he'll get the blame. And that actually worked.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for that damn DNA, he could have gotten away with it, and Allan would have gotten the blame for everything.
I know, and it was like, it must be so frustrating. Like, it was only like brand new DNA as well. Like, this didn't exist beforehand.
Yeah,
but
just came out.
Miramichi, that was not a safe place to live at the
exactly.
time.
Well, you spoke about at the end of part 1 that there was something in the water.
With multiple murders.
A lot of murders around that time. It's weird. But still, with Allan Vienneau off the streets, it was something. Well, it would have been, if it wasn't then eclipsed by the news breaking of Legere's last and most brutal act of violence. The same day, Allan Vienneau was taken into custody, November 15th, 1989, 69-year-old Father James Smith of the Nativity of the Blessed Virgin Mary Church in Chatham Head, New Brunswick, had been performing his usual duties and then spent a couple of hours, between 2:30 and 5 p.m, visiting patients at Miramichi Hospital. A Newcastle high schooler stopped by Father Smith's home at around 5:30 p.m. to drop something off. According to the teen, the priest was having a bite to eat and seemed perfectly fine in his home at the time. The teen handed over an envelope and left Father Smith to enjoy his dinner. Later that evening, at around 9 p.m, Father Smith was spotted standing on his patio, looking around his yard. According to his neighbor, he appeared to be scanning for something, or looking for someone. It was almost as if he had heard something in the woods around his house. That was the last time anyone saw Father Smith alive. On November 16th, 1989, authorities confirmed the earlier story of the DNA link between Legere and the recent spat of killings, to which the whole of the Miramichi area replied with, duh. Basically, yeah, thanks, great. Half an hour after the RCMP's press conference confirmed the DNA link, Newcastle resident and one of Smith's longest-serving parishioners, Clara Ramsey, went to the priest's home after he failed to show up for Mass at the Blessed Virgin Mary Church. Knowing it was very out of character for him not to arrive for Mass without any warning, and that if Father Smith wasn't at the church, he should have been home, Clara decided to wait it out. After 10 minutes or so, a couple of other witnesses reported hearing a car's horn in the father's garage at the church. Something was going on. By 7 p.m. that evening, more than 30 of Father Smith's parishioners were waiting to hear from him inside the church. One of them noticed there were no lights on in the rectory, and that was far from normal right before Mass. The lights should be on in there, right? He's getting ready and saying his prayers and whatnot. Soon, word reached Nick Veriker, who was like the handyman for Father Smith and the church, and he had an emergency key to the rectory. After briefly going in, Nick ran back outside, screaming for someone to call the police. The scene they'd walked into was an absolute nightmare. Father Smith had been brutally beaten to death. A doctor was called in, but he was clearly beyond any help and quickly pronounced at the scene, and Father Smith's colleague was called in to perform the last rites, all while the priest's blood was spattered around the room and his killer was fleeing across town in Father Smith's car.
Yeah, the room, it looked like something straight out of a horror movie. So Legere, he spent a good amount of time torturing Father Smith, demanding to know where the money was, even though there was none. So he started by slashing at Father Smith with a knife before pummeling with his fists, and then started kicking him while he was lying on the ground. Afterwards, he was dragged onto a chair and he was bound with a shirt. He was then subjected to deeper, more deliberate wounds as Legere, he started carving his face, his head and his neck with the knife. When that still didn't get him the answer that he wanted, Legere, he started to brute force. He started kicking Smith in the chest repeatedly, breaking several ribs. Then he threw him to the ground and choked him with such force that it fractured the small bones in his neck.
Oof.
The final blow then came when Legere, he jumped on the priest's chest with both feet, completely caving it in.
Damn.
Yeah, it was brutal, man.
Yeah, that's a horrible way to go. The subsequent investigation into Father Smith's death revealed some utterly horrifying details, as Keith revealed to us. Not only had the killer, who the police were all but certain was Legere, brutally murdered a 69-year-old defenseless priest for his own demented reasons, but then he had casually stayed the night in the man's home. While Smith lay dead or dying, Legere had taken the time to wash his clothes, wash his boots, and then placed plastic bags over them in order to not leave footprints. Luckily for investigators, Legere had already left a footprint in his victim's blood that he hadn't noticed. Legere had been so brazen and calm, he had even answered a phone call to the priest's house and told the caller they'd gotten the wrong number. There's no reason to do that other than for shits and giggles.
Jeez.
So while the RCMP were still responding to the discovery of Father Smith's body and Father Leo Sullivan was performing the last rites, Legere had abandoned Father Smith's Oldsmobile, which he had hotwired after not being able to find the keys and then stolen from the Rectory garage. At 7:45 p.m., Legere purchased a ticket on the 8:28 p.m. day-night train to Montreal. The ticket agent later recalled the incident, stating that it stood out in his memory because the man had stood off to one side while buying the ticket, almost like he didn't want to be seen. At 9:30 that night, Father Smith's car was found abandoned around half a mile from the train station. And so the police, well, it doesn't take a genius to figure out maybe Legere is finally leaving Miramichi for good.
Yeah.
By the early morning hours, the RCMP had taken over the case from the local police. They knew from the previous times that they'd come so close to catching up with Legere that they needed to act quickly and cast a net as wide as possible. The last thing the authorities needed was another embarrassing near miss, and as I said, finding the priest's car near a train station didn't take a genius to figure out where Legere was going and what he was doing.
No more silly mistakes from here on out. I mean, they already let him escape from prison,
Hey.
which led to all this, so...
Yeah, they would look pretty damn silly if they were to make a little, whoopsie-doodle at this point in the story, am I right?
I'm pretty sure they're going to be on the ball from now on.
Oh, gotta love them. So, whoopsie-doodle, 3 plainclothes RCMP officers were able to board the train. They were able to actually board the exact train Legere was thought to be traveling on. They got on at a stop the stop was in, Rivière-du-Loup, Quebec.
Nice.
So the 3 plainclothes officers, they began going car to car, knocking on the door, checking passengers, giving them a goo, pat down, hoping to catch Legere at last. Scanning the crowds of passengers on this train. They knew he can't get off.
He'd nowhere to run.
He nowhere to run.
They got him.
Finally. They knew they were looking for a large, dark-haired man, likely with a moustache or a short beard. He's been living in the wild now for, 7 months at this point.
Yep.
The 9-car train was a daunting challenge, and the original 3 officers were eventually reinforced by more than a dozen other Mounties. Oh my, okay. There's like over 15 officers on this train.
Yeah.
They got him, right?
Looking for someone who it's just like a load of suits and one guy in a leotard covered in mud.
Yeah. Things can't go wrong here. Just before 5 a.m., officers came into contact with passenger number 30, a man from Boutouche named Fernand Savoie. The man, bore more than a passing resemblance to descriptions of Legere, but was far from the 200-pound monster they had been expecting. Fortunately, though, the RCMP had a plan in place in order to confirm Legere's identity, should he be traveling under a false name and maybe he changed his appearance. The officers were told that the man they were hunting, Legere, had tattoos of an eagle and a nautical star on his right forearm. So the officers simply said, "Mr. Savoie, roll up your sleeve and let us have a go at your arm." Mr. Savoie did, and nothing. there was nothing there. It wasn't him. And so the officers, they apologized for taking the man's time, let him be on his way. I mean, I'm sure you can imagine just how bad the feeling among the public was when news of the latest victim of a brutal murder being an innocent priest, that news broke to the public in Miramichi over the next few days. The only thing that could make that worse was if the police, they happened to talk to Legere and still let him slip through because of a simple mistake. There was too much riding on this to be as dumb as this, isn't there? Well, remember when we said Fernand Savoy wasn't Legere? That was Legere. That was they literally spoke to Allan Legere and then let him be on his way.
So stupid.
You see, the officers had been told that the man they were looking for had an eagle and a star tattooed on his right forearm. But when they checked the man on the train, he didn't have those tattoos. But he didn't get rid of them. They'd simply been given the wrong arm. The tattoos were on his left forearm. They'd been told they were on his right. And they didn't ask him for his left forearm. They had just asked for his right. He rolled up, there was nothing. If they'd asked him, could you roll up both sleeves?
Yeah.
They would have gotten him.
Oh, it's so dumb.
That's how dumb this is.
The most frustrating part about this is when he rolled up his sleeve to his elbow, the RCMP, they were like, nope, all the way up to your shoulder, buddy. We want to be thorough and, leave no stone unturned. All right, off you go. It's not there.
Take off your entire t-shirt, but you can leave your other arm covered. It's fine.
This definitely started off as someone doing the descriptions is that my left or his left?
Partly what it was, they were looking at a picture of him. The picture is mirrored. They're like, oh yeah. I literally think it's probably how it happened. That's so funny. So Legere got away scot-free, and Legere, still under the alias of Savoy, deboarded the train at the end of the line in Montreal, and then checked into the Queen Elizabeth Hotel for several nights, paying $130 per night. The people of the Miramichi were very, very pissed off now, as you can imagine. Faith in the RCMP was crashing, and authorities knew they needed to bring Legere in now. They couldn't afford any more cock-ups. He had slipped through their fingers yet again.
Yep. No more mistakes from here on out.
No more. The RCMP were essentially given a blank check by the provincial government. Anything they needed, whatever it took, they were to end the hunt now. The reward money was increased massively, shooting up to $50,000. Multiple people were arrested on being suspicious of Legere. They're like, arrest everybody now. The RCMP did not want him getting away again. One call reported an armed man roaming around in Newcastle ended up being a rabbit hunter, and he was taken in at gunpoint. Meanwhile, Legere was staying at the Queen Elizabeth Hotel. He had even approached an optometrist to make up a new pair of prescription glasses for him. Legere funded his stay and purchases by selling a whole bunch of goods stolen in his 7-month-long burglary spree. He got $450 for a heap of jewelry shui. The truth is, the RCMP were at a loss. They'd been outfoxed and outlooked by Legere at every single turn. At one point, they thought maybe he was being helped by another man and put out a sketch to try and identify the accomplice. Only for a Chatham police officer to realize that the man they thought was helping Legere was simply Legere himself. They put it. That's how stupid they are.
This is so dumb.
Yeah, they had two pictures of Legere, but one of them was his pre-escape. One of his was post-escape, where he lost a bunch of weight and it put his hair. So they thought it was two different people. It's just him living rough for 7 months.
When I looked at the photograph, there is a difference. And one, I said, he's a beast of a man. The next one is he's definitely lost a lot of weight. But I don't go around and call myself a detective.
Yeah.
They really should have known.
Yeah. Fortunately for authorities, though, for once the winds of luck were about to turn in their favor. On November 23rd, 1989. Legere was seen lurking around the Piper's Club on Prince William Street in St. John, New Brunswick at around 11 p.m. Shortly after, Legere got into a taxi belonging to St. John taxi driver Ron Gomke and asked Gomke how much the flat fare would be to go to Moncton. Back home again. These are turning home. Moncton, by the way, was more than 100 miles away, so Gomke had to radio it in, get a quote. Only when Gomke turned to deliver the news that it would be about $100, he was instead met with the end of 2 rifles with sawn-off barrels, which even outside of Canada is considered rather rude. He ordered the driver to tell dispatch he was taking the fare, following up with, "I'm the one they're looking for. I'm Allan Legere."
I love that. I was like, that's going to be $100. But there is a discount today.
So, due to the time of year and Canada, basically, the weather was appalling. This is late November. Sideways, snow, icy roads. And Gomke, not wanting to die in a horrifying crash, tried to drive slowly and carefully. Unfortunately, he also didn't want to die from being shot in the head, so he was forced to drive at the top of the limit. 60 in the snow isn't ever a great idea, let alone under the kind of stress that comes from having an armed maniac with a tendency to get a bit rapey as your navigator. It was almost inevitable that the car was going to come off the road, and eventually it did just that. After hitting a snowbank, Legere and Gomke both walked away physically unharmed, but in need of a new vehicle. Now, Legere knew that taxi driver Rom Gomke would run to the police as soon as he could, so had to keep him with him as his hostage at this point. Legere hid his sawn-off .3008 rifle while he flagged down a passing car. And in a ironic twist of fate, the car that stopped was being driven by Michelle Mercer. Constable Michelle Mercer of the RCMP.
That's mad.
Yeah, I know. Of all the people to stop, it's an RCMP person.
Seriously, what are the chances?
Yeah. Mercer was returning from Montreal and knew that something was wrong from the off. Instead of one man getting in the front and the other in the back, the smaller man, Legere, seemed to be almost forcing the bigger guy into the back of the car before joining him. After a short dispute over the smaller man, Legere wanting to turn the car around, Michelle said, "Listen, I'm a cop, I'm with the RCMP, I'm driving." And so then Legere said, "Well, I'm Allan Legere, so what are you going to do about that?" Yeah.
Speak to the gun.
Yeah, exactly. So, Crazy Killer tops off-duty cop, and Legere got his way, only to change his mind and set them back on the road to Moncton. Just outside of Sussex, a small town, Michelle told Legere that they needed to stop for gas. Legere had smoked a joint, so appeared to have calmed down a little and agreed to let them stop for gas. Michelle stopped her car, hoping that maybe the chance would come for her to escape the situation. Mercer put $15 worth of gas into the car, before Legere took the keys and cash from her and went inside the pay. Legere dropped a $20 bill on the counter and went back outside, only, well, Michelle was a smart squirrel, and when Legere had gone inside to pay, she asked Ron Gomke, "You want to make a run for it?" Well, yeah. He did, yeah. And luckily, Michelle had a spare key to the vehicle. So they basically, as soon as Legere walked in to pay for the gas, they hauled ass out of there. They simply just drove away. And he's like,
I'm sure that cashier would be fine all on his own with the madman with a gun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I love that. It's like, well, screw that person there.
I'm out of here.
Yeah.
You coming?
They drove to the nearest RCMP station and used the emergency phone there to call the whole thing in. And when Legere realized that the car was gone, he looked around for a replacement. Nearby the gas station was a long-haul truck being driven by Brian Golding. Golding was driving his route from Montreal to Halifax and had seen the car with Legere arrive and leave, but hadn't realized Legere was still inside when the car left. Legere approached Golding and identified himself before telling Golding, "We're leaving." Golding took a few minutes to come to terms with the bizarre circumstances, but once he asked Legere where does he want to go, Legere told him Moncton. Constable Mercer, meanwhile, knew the response had to be fast if they were going to have any chance of catching up with Legere, and fast the response was. As soon as the name Legere was mentioned, and knowing the identification had been verified by one of their own, RCMP cars flooded the area and surrounded the gas station. Within minutes, dozens of Mounties were swarming, and all possible roads were blocked. Authorities knew he was in the area, and he was not going to get far. So, after reaching Moncton, Legere ordered Golding to keep on going, and eventually Allan Legere even fell asleep inside of the truck.
He's like taking a real chill. Like he was
I know.
Smoking weed or smoking a joint and just like falling asleep.
Yeah, he's kind of just giving up at this point. He's
Yeah.
Golding continued driving on, but when they reached the town of Rogersville, he was forced to wake Legere up. Legere allowed Golding to pull over and told him he wanted to catch a flight from a small airstrip in Chatham and travel to, guess where? Iran. Did you guess that? I don't think you did.
Where do you go when you're on the run? You say Iran.
Hey, of course you do. Where else are you going to go?
Just makes sense.
So quite why he thought that was a good idea, nobody really knows.
I told you.
Yeah, well, that's fair. You did solve this problem, yes. You solved the case. Golding managed to persuade Legere, again, this time to separate the cab and trailer so they could move faster. Golding had been hoping for the chance to flee, but it never actually presented itself while he was detaching the trailer. Once back in the cab, Legere's 10-minute-long dream of meeting the Ayatollah went out the window, and now he wanted Golding to drive along the Miramichi River. That meant using a side road, a road that trucks weren't usually meant to use. In fact, that was enough for a fellow truck driver who spotted them. Well, he used his radio and called the unusual sight in. He thought it was weird a truck was going down one of those roads. The RCMP had a roadblock set up not too far away and sent 2 officers, Corporal Barter and Corporal Lutwick, to check out the small road the truck had been seen driving on. The responding officers, in a car driven by Corporal Barter, came into contact with the truck in question soon after and signaled for the vehicle to pull over, but the instructions were ignored. Legere had ordered Golding to continue on and ignore the officers' orders. The police followed the truck for almost half an hour before it suddenly pulled off to the side of the road, and seconds later, a terrified Brian Golding jumped down from the cab, and as he was bolting for safety, he shouted to the officers, "It's him! It's him! He's got a gun!"
Yeah, he was really giving up at this point, wasn't he? Like, that was his only bargaining, like the hostage.
Yeah, exactly. He just let him go. Lutwick and Barter took out their own rifles, and Barter grabbed Golding, tossing him out of the way. With Golding secured, the cops moved in on the suspect still in the cab. Given the months-long hunt and trail of carnage Legere had left in his wake, Lutwick and Barter's actions were incredibly brave, and the men fully expected that they may be walking headfirst into a gunfight. But in the end, it was nothing. It all ended with a whimper. Like the true bully and coward he was, as soon as Legere was confronted by someone who wasn't intimidated by him and was able to meet him on his own terms, he crumbled. Lutwick backed up Barter and ordered Legere down from the truck. Legere complied and exited with his hands up, telling the officers, "I'm alright, I'm okay, you got me." With Lutwick's foot on his neck, Barter cuffed Legere, and as he did so, Legere motioned his arms towards his body, prompting Barter to boot him in the chops. Once Legere was cuffed and his weapons secured, the officers discovered the sawn-off shotgun had been locked and loaded. While Legere sat on the back of the cruiser, Barter called the arrest in, and the entire Miramichi community breathed a collective sigh of relief. Before 6 a.m., Legere would be in custody at the RCMP building in Newcastle, the city where he had committed the most heinous of his crimes.
There you go. The Mounties always get their man.
After...
They may have been the ones that let him out.
Yes, exactly. They may have let him out. They may have let him slip through.
Mistake after mistake.
They may have even talked to him and been convinced it wasn't him and let him go, but they got him. Legere first came to trial the next year in August of 1990, charged with the original escape and kidnapping of Peggy Olive way back when. Legere was never going to admit anything. It took only 6 hours for the jury to find him guilty, and after the trial started and finished, he was sentenced to 9 years to be served concurrently with his original life sentence for the Glendenning murder.
I forgot he already had a life sentence.
Yeah, oh yeah, exactly.
Like, even if he got away with this, he still has a life sentence to finish off.
Ah, sure, fuck it, like, why not? At this point, it was still being argued whether or not, as you were saying, they should even bother with the other potential charges against Legere, given that he was already serving a life sentence. In November of 1990, public and political pressure would finally culminate in a press conference, in which the RCMP announced they would be prosecuting Legere for 4 counts of first-degree murder.
Makes sense, I guess. Like, if you had a family member killed, you want them to see justice. Instead of just, we'll skip it. Like, he already served the life for one killing.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Legere's trial was a strange and prolonged ordeal in itself. There were numerous delays to the start of the trial, thanks to it being so hard to find potential jurors who hadn't been prejudiced by the massive media coverage naming Legere as the man behind the recent vertical spike in crime around the Miramichi River. The trial was scheduled to begin in February of 1991 for the murders. Legere did his best to delay things even more, arguing that the Crown had given themselves more than a year to learn about DNA, so why shouldn't he get the very same? While awaiting trial, Legere wrote several letters to the media, complaining about the judge's behavior and potential bias. He also told them he was planning a hunger strike over his treatment. Guys, if you don't treat me well, I'm gonna do it, I swear, I'm gonna do something, you guys are gonna regret it. The trial's original start date instead became a hearing on when the trial would finally begin, with the 22nd of April being accepted by both sides for opening arguments and admissions into evidence. The trial came to a close in November of 1991. It lasted a long-ass time, with Legere being found guilty of the 4 murders committed during his 201 days on the run.
Jesus.
Where he almost got to Iran.
Hey.
I mean, he didn't almost get there, but in his head he did.
Yeah.
Legere was transferred to the Edmonton Institution in Alberta, and despite being sentenced to multiple life sentences and being given the highest risk designation a prisoner can receive in the Canadian system, that still hasn't stopped Legere from making public statements questioning, why am I still in prison? Why you guys say this is unjust? And in August of 2020, recently enough, in the midst of COVID, he even had the cheek to apply for a day release.
Oh, I've got an ear infection again.
Exactly. It's my other ear this time. Don't check my ass.
You're walking funny, Allan.
Naturally, the Miramichi community were furious. It was even a possibility, but his appeal was subsequently denied in January 2021. And so that's where he is today, still sitting in his cell in Alberta, wondering why the world hates him. Still a guy in his 70s who probably would, if he could, get out there, keep on killing.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that is the story of Allan Legere, the monster of the Miramichi.
Yeah, man. Thankfully, he'll never get out.
No,
he's a danger.
mean, never say never.
Never say never.
He can probably, who knows what he can put up his ass at this point, you know?
Yeah.
Or in his cigar.
Those massive cigars.
Yeah, his big old Cubans he has. You never know. Never put it past a man like Legere.
Yeah. He's definitely resourceful.
I know. You get credit where credit's due. All right. Fun story. I mean, not fun, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, it was good, yeah.
Interesting. The thing I just find most crazy is, I'd never heard of this story before.
Right, yeah.
And it's mad.
Yeah.
It's mental. It's absolutely fucking mental. So huge thank you, by the way, to Liam Orr, who sent in this topic, the case of Allan Legere. Huge thank you to him. I'd never heard of this story if he hadn't emailed it in, suggesting we give it a go. So if you at home, folks, you got any other stories you'd like to see us have a gander at on the That Chapter podcast, please send them in to mikeohhello@gmail.com. Same email address you send in your ghost stories to. Any suggestions, topics you would like to, hear me and Keith yammer on about, send them in. Sure, why not? And you know what? We'll give them a go. Well, there you have it. Thanks for listening, folks. All right, I think next we should get back to some horror-y stuff. I do want to do more cryptids. We haven't covered cryptids. We've been covering a lot of true crime lately, so let's get back to some spooks.
Yeah, let's do something out of the box. Something spooky, something
I might even relent, and maybe we could do witches again soon or something. I might relent on. Keith's eyes is lit up, folks. You wouldn't believe it.
We're going back to Salem.
I am wearing a sweater with Salem on it. All right. Well, folks, look forward to that, because I know Keith is. And yeah, thanks so much for listening, folks. It means a lot to me and Keith. And please, like, subscribe, rate, review. It helps out the podcast tremendously much. So thank you. And talk to you next week, I suppose.
Yeah, and
whenever we do.
I'll see you.
All right, thanks, guys. Bye. Booch? Tooch? A Bootouche? I think that's a town.
Sounds good.
Yeah.